And so, yet another entry into the hidden history of the African American warrior. Today, a little information about a man who years, nearly 5 decades, in fact, after his heroic efforts, he had to lobby for recognition from this country's government. I'm talking about Civil War veteran Bruce Anderson. He was a Union Army soldier and eventually recipient of the Medal of Honor for his actions during the Second Battle of Fort Fisher. Now, Anderson was born in Mexico City. By the beginning of the Civil War, he was already working as a farmer in New York. He enlisted in Schenectady into the Union as a private in Company K of the 142nd New York Volunteer Infantry. He had the distinction of being an African American soldier who served in a white Civil War regiment. That was not unique, but kind of unusual, especially for that year. By January of the following year, 1865, Anderson participated in the second attack on Fort Fisher, which is in North Carolina. He and 12 other soldiers answered the call for volunteers. They had to advance ahead of a main unit to cut down a palisade that had blocked their way down through to the fort. There was intense fire from Confederate defenders. However, Anderson and the others were able to successfully destroy that obstacle, and the general, Adelbert Ames, recommended that all 13 of the men receive the Medal of Honor. However, his report happened to be misplaced. It was nearly 50 years later, in 1914, Anderson hired himself a lawyer, and he launched the effort to receive his Medal of Honor. But not only his, those other 12 individuals who fought with him as well. The Palisade Cutting Group included Private Zachariah Nair, who successfully petitioned for the awards a couple decades earlier. The general of the Army at the time, the Adjutant General of the Army, launched an investigation into why Anderson had not received his medal. That uncovered that the initial letter of recommendation had been lost at the time. 3 others who were still living were also issued their Medal of Honor, but it wasn't until this date, December 28th, in 1914, that these individuals got their letter. A Private Chapin and Merrill were also issued their Medal of Honor along with Anderson. And Anderson did go on to live a bit longer. He eventually returned to New York and settled in Amsterdam before dying in 1922 at the age of 77. His citation for his Medal of Honor reads, "The President of the United States of America, in the name of Congress, takes pleasure in presenting the Medal of Honor to Private Bruce Anderson, United States Army, for extraordinary heroism on the 15th of January, 1865, while serving with Company K of the 142nd New York Infantry in action at Fort Fisher, North Carolina. Private Anderson voluntarily advanced with the head of the column and cut down the palisading. General orders, date of issue, December 28th, 1914. That kind of brings me into today's principle of Kwanzaa before we get into the world news. Habargani. Ujima. Collective work and responsibility is very, very important, especially when it comes to Bruce Anderson and seeking his Medal of Honor, along with the other individuals who are still living at the time. Collective work and responsibility. It kind of speaks to what a caller was talking about yesterday. That might be something that our politicians need to look at specifically on this date. Collective work and responsibility. You gotta have both of those. Ms. Judy, I think they're both important.
Yeah, they are. And politicians, with Kwanzaa, it's about you. It's about
Yes.
your family. It's about your community. About what you can do as individuals. And it's easy. And I think our guest yesterday
yesterday, Tanya Timms Taylor addressed that very clearly. It's so easy to see what everybody else ought to do and the obstacles that will keep us from accomplishing what we want. But if you focus on what you got and who you are and know who you are, yesterday was self-determination. You determine for yourself that you are more than able and more than capable. The collective work and responsibility is now, I'm bold in who I am. You're bold in who you are. Whitlock is bold in who she is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Kemp said yesterday. Remember when Kemp called yesterday? From last year's Kwanzaa, I understood that there's some work to be done. And while I, as one, can't do it, I know some other folks that also recognize work needs to be done. And so collectively, we form, and we just do what we got to do. And you ain't got to have a meeting. You ain't got to have a president. You don't have to, but collectively, let's do what we need to do. Okay, so a quick story, and then we're going to the news. Quick story. When we were kids, my dad, there were 9 of us. 9 of us. I was 11 years old when my dad became a Gulfport police officer. Before that, what my dad did, and even after that, because he was a police officer, and then he also was a plasterer latherer. He did construction work. And so with construction work, depending on how good business is booming, or depending on what the weather's like, or sometimes you work, sometimes you don't. Sometimes he was in Jackson. Sometimes he was in Hattiesburg. Sometimes he was somewhere in Louisiana. Sometimes he was in Alabama. He was working because he had 9 kids to feed, and sometimes it wasn't convenient to do it at home. And so a lot of these guys, a lot of these craftsmen from right here would together travel together to go and do these various jobs. But then he became a police officer. But always there's something, if he wasn't working, he was fishing or he was hunting, and we had a garden. And my daddy, who never did anything in a small way, we had a garden at the house. We had a garden on the property across the street from the house, and then he bought another piece of land on the other side of town on 39th, and he had a garden over there. And it was 9 of us, but my daddy grew enough food for 99. And so this particular year, he had like a booming crop. His property on 39th Avenue, he would grow string beans and butter beans over there. We had so many string beans, so we also, everybody works. Who was that called yesterday and said, you don't work, you don't eat? That's one of the things that we learned from Nancy.
Amen.
So he had all of us out there. My brother had driven his car, Daddy had a van, and we're picking string beans. And we filled up all the bags, and Daddy said, just empty the bags into the van. We can't leave them on the vine, we gotta pick them up. So we're picking string beans, we're picking string beans. By the time we finish, my daddy's van is filled with string beans. So everybody piled into my brother's car to go back home except me. He said, Judy, you ride with me. And so I'm in the van with him, and because my dad was on the police force and he knew everybody in every community, and he knew what people had lots of children and were doing the same struggling he was doing to make sure that your children get fed. We drove, and so this is over in West Gulfport in the quarters. From West Gulfport through Surrey City, through Magnolia Grove, through Mississippi City, through Hansborough, we're going down the street, and Daddy would pull up in front of a house and he'd blow the horn and he'd holler, hey, Mr. Lombard, how you doing? You want some string beans? Oh, I don't have any money today, Mr. Lombard. Yeah, I didn't ask you for no money. You want some string beans or not? Load up that bag right there, baby. Give her a bag of string beans. We did that from the quarters, through Surrey City, through Magnolia Grove, through Mississippi City, and through Hansborough. He never charged anybody for anything. You need some tomatoes? Baby, come over there and pick some of them greens. I'm going to give you the greens, but I ain't going to pick them for you. Come get your greens. That was collective work and responsibility, because when somebody else was rolling sugar cane, Miss Lombard, I got some syrup for you. For them children to have syrup with their biscuits. That's what we did. We worked collectively to make it happen. We weren't no president. We were not. One time, before global warming, before global warming got this bad, it used to really freeze down here. And houses that are built off the ground, the pipes would freeze. So I remember one year, and it was during the Christmas season, so it had to be around this time of the year. Everybody's pipes froze. And so all the men in the neighborhood fixed everybody's pipes. It's like, okay, let's go over here, we're gonna fix their pipes first, because you know they got all them children over there, and they fixed those. Okay, now we're going over to this one's pipe. So they had fixed everybody's pipes. Well, the people across the street from us, the Hills, were from Ripley, Mississippi. And every year they would go home to Ripley, Mississippi for the holidays. Understand, there's no such thing as central air and heat. You had gas room heaters. You don't leave them on when you're going to be gone for 2 weeks.
Right.
In your house. So the whole house is cold. The pipes have obviously broken under the house. And probably my dad's main concern is the water in their toilet has probably frozen and broken the toilet. So when they get home, and when this house starts to defrost, it's going to be water everywhere. So my daddy broke into their house. He did. He went in their house. The men in the community went out. They got under that house. They fixed those pipes. They bought a new toilet. They put the toilet in. They knew that they were going to be home the next day. My daddy went in and lit all of the heaters, turned them on low so the house would be warm. It wouldn't freeze again. Left the water running a little bit so the pipes wouldn't freeze. So they came home to something else. You just collective work and responsibility. Yeah. This is a job that needs to be done. I have the ability to do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's as simple as that. But you got to take that initiative, and I think that is a big reason why Kwanzaa is so important, because a lot of folks conveniently lose sight of these principles, and that does our entire society a disservice when we don't implement those lessons that we maybe should have learned from the previous generations, like what your father just did. I mean, those stories are passed down for our betterment, not just for entertainment purposes.
And they were lessons lived.
Yeah.
You know, lessons that when you hear Rick telling these stories about things his dad did, his mom did, his grandmother did, living in the project, it wasn't like they sat you down and said, okay, let me tell you this. They just lived it. Yeah. And you learned it because you lived it with them.
Yeah.
You saw what collective work and responsibility looked like, and you learned how to work with other people to solve the problem.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Lesson for the world. If each and every last one of us just did what we're capable of doing and played well with others, God, what a different world we'd have.
Absolutely, absolutely. If we take that initiative and move forward, especially younger people, and especially moving into, you know, like I mentioned before, that political realm. But I think that growing out of your community, the first community being your family, helps individuals to maintain and actually execute things for the betterment of society, and not just the betterment of themselves or the enrichment of themselves. Our neighbor to the east, Alabama, will be swearing in their new senator here, despite the objections of the loser. Roy Moore just can't let it go. He has launched a formal complaint against the winner of the special election to fill the Senate seat that was left vacant by the now Attorney General Jeffy Sessions. Moore has refused to concede and even requested a new election. However, as the great Bobby Rush said, one monkey don't stop no show. And the Secretary of State of Alabama confirmed that Mr. Moore would not be stopping any shows as far as it was concerning the election there. The winner of the Alabama special election, Doug Jones, will still be sworn in today about 2 p.m.
1 p.m.
1 p.m. our time. Thank you. And despite Roy Moore's objections, that does not change. I'm not really sure why he figured that it would change anything, but I guess it's the same reason why he has not yet conceded.
He said the numbers from Jefferson County were suspiciously low. So
Well, and then other
whatever that
counties he
means.
felt were
Suspiciously high. He cannot accept that African Americans could be so insulted
Yeah,
by him saying that we were better off during slavery, that they would just come out in record numbers, or women would be so insulted by him and by a governor that would say, yeah, I agree, he's a sexual predator, but
better than
that's better
Democrat.
than a Democrat, really? And so when you look at the numbers, the people, it's like folks are just enough.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not who or what we want to represent us. But when you've convinced yourself that you're right and everybody else in the world is wrong, you can't concede.
yeah.
is that mindset.
And it's amazing to me. It's going to be interesting to watch it play out. That they're suggesting that this is futile,
Yeah,
go anywhere.
yeah.
Um,
And we heard that official word from John Merrill from the Secretary of State's office this morning on CNN.
Will this affect anything? The short answer to that is no. Doug Jones will be certified today at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Central Time. The Governor, Kay Ivey, our Attorney General, Steve Marshall, and I will meet in the Office of the Secretary of State in the Executive Office, and we will sign the document certifying him as the Senator for the state of Alabama. He will be sworn in by Vice President Pence on the 3rd of January when the Senate returns.
And you'll have a new senator, despite the loser. And we go forward, and we can't help but do that. A lot of folks can't move forward when it comes to the president, though. They like to harp on the previous president, and it might be because so many people still like the previous president and appreciate the previous president. The Gallup poll was just released about the most admired titles here. Americans, once again, like former President Barack Obama, a little bit more than Donald Trump. No shocker there.
They like Obama
They like Obama.
because he beat a lot of other people.
Yeah, including the,
He just happened to be one of them.
but he also beat the likes of the Pope. So once again, 17% surveyed found that Barack Obama was the most admired male. Donald Trump had 14%. Pope Francis just 3%. That really doesn't say anything politically. However, I think a lot of people have a hatred toward, to borrow a phrase, towards other people's respect and admiration and recognition of things that were done by previous administrations.
Waste my energy. It doesn't matter. Okay, so the poll says that most admired man, Barack Obama.
Yeah.
I love the list though. I mean, because
Yeah,
it's some folks on here. Reverend Billy Graham, John McCain made the list, top 10.
top 10. Yeah,
Bernie Sanders made the list. The Dalai Lama made the list.
yeah. Elon Musk.
Yeah, Bill Gates, and number 10 on the list is Mike Pence. I mean, so there are others that fell beneath that even. These are just the top 10.
Yeah,
American spiel. We didn't talk about politics because politics has already shown us, even if we don't admire a person, we'll vote for them because they're in the party that I like.
right.
I mean, we do dumb stuff.
When it comes to picking sides, and my side is better than your side, unfortunately in this country we do a lot of dumb stuff when it comes to that. But again, cooperative work and responsibility, if that's honored, would bring us out of that.
Yeah, and got vote. Most admired women, top of the list. Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton.
Oprah Winfrey is in the top 10
Yeah,
for the
30th time.
30.
30th time. She's been in the top 10, I think, the most.
Oprah has.
Yeah, Elizabeth Warren, Angela Merkel, the Queen Elizabeth, Condoleezza Rice. Melania Trump, and she's like 8th, I want to say. Nikki Haley, the Duchess,
Oh, Duchess Kate.
and Beyonce made top 10.
Wow. Most admired women in the country. And, you know, of course, this is a percentage of those who are actually in the country. It is a survey. However, it does say a lot about tastes and how people still admire folks despite the change in trends or an attempt of changes in trends.
And one of the things it is interesting, and Gallup points out, they point out quite a few things. One of the things that they say is Hillary's been on the list for several years in a row. They don't know if she will be on it again. This may be her last time. She's been number one for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But
She's won the past 16 years.
But being as though they're saying this is probably the end of her political career, they don't know if she'll still remain at the top. But one of the other things that I thought was interesting is they're saying that they've done this poll since 1946, 71 times. 58 of those times, the incumbent president won.
Number one.
Number one. This is so one of the few times that the sitting president hasn't won. Previous incumbent presidents who did not finish first include Harry Truman, Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, George W. Bush. All but Truman and Ford had job approval ratings well below 50%, as does Trump right now. So, you know, it's just kind of showing that. I thought this was really interesting.
Yeah.
It didn't count for anything as far as a vote for a law, but it's just interesting to see what people think and whose names actually show up on the list as people that are admired in our country. Interesting.
Yeah. Who's admirable? Who is worthy of your admiration in this country?
I want to talk about this for 1 second.
Yeah.
Go to another news story. And this just kind of broke this morning. And I know our listeners who around the country, if our folks over in Atlanta are going to know who this lady is. Amanda Davis. She's a veteran Atlanta news anchor, 62 years old. And when they said 62 years old, I almost fell over because she looks like she's probably in her 30s. She looks very, very good. Beautiful woman. Great news reporter. Yesterday was in the airport there in Atlanta. On her way, she was getting ready to get on a flight to Texas to her stepfather's funeral and had a massive stroke.
Oh my God.
And passed away last night at 62 years old. Y'all, pay attention to your health. Pay attention to your health, because strokes and heart attacks are killing us left and right. And it's because sometimes we just don't pay attention to the signs that are there. Pay attention. Make 2018 your year to get healthy, your year to look out after you, because this was a young, promising young woman who, at 62 years old, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, just she had a massive stroke at the airport, was rushed to a hospital, and passed away last night. Tomorrow could be me, it could be you. Pay attention to your health. Pay attention to those symptoms that you just keep ignoring. Pay attention.
And you mentioned how young she looked. That's no indicator. There's no indicator of your health how you look. So just because you look good doesn't necessarily mean that you are good. You need to make sure you check yourself.
And sometimes there's some warning signs. Usually there's some warning signs. We just don't pay attention.
Right.
Know why I keep getting this constant headache? Why I keep getting lightheaded?
Lethargy. Why am I tired all the time?
Yeah. Why am I so exhausted? Why am I having all this swelling in my legs and my feet all of a sudden? Those kind of things. Pay attention. Don't just poo-poo them off, shoo them off. You know, make sure that you pay attention and take care of you. You know, when you're flying on a plane, and they say, in case of emergency, put your oxygen on first, because you can't help somebody else if you can't breathe.
Right.
And there are people out here who are dependent on you to be here.
Definitely take care of yourself. and that's a good resolution to take better care of yourself. Unfortunately, our home city has a very horrible distinction when it comes to New Year's resolutions. The very worst city on Mississippi's Gulf Coast for keeping New Year's resolutions is, yes, Gulfport. Not just Mississippi's worst, the nation's worst on keeping New Year's resolution. Gulfport ranks. This is according to a WalletHub survey. Gulfport ranks the nation's worst city for keeping New Year's resolutions. That included the top 5 worst cities under Gulfport were Shreveport, Louisiana, Newark, New Jersey, Jackson, Mississippi, and Detroit, Michigan. The survey, 2018's best and worst cities for keeping your New Year's resolution, used the metrics and supported data to look up various aspects of all 182 cities, and Gulfport ranked 182 overall.
No, we don't.
How would they assess that anyway?
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Gulfport, Mississippi has the most honest people in America. They're lying. They didn't keep their resolutions either.
They're just trying to single us out. I understand. Gulfport ranked 181st in income growth, 178th in gems per capita, 176th in percentage of delinquent debtors, 172nd in smoking rate, and 151st in percentage of obese adults. Gulfport and Jackson are the only Mississippi cities that were included in that survey.
The second largest city in the state, so they chose Jackson the largest, and then us. We're just honest.
We're just honest.
Oh, the truth.
At least you know now, WalletHub. The survey also looked at binge drinking or heavy drinking, access to parks and restaurants, school ratings, incomes, and credit scores. Location could set you up for failure, especially if the motivation is low, according to WalletHub. That's another aspect of their rankings. The best rankings for New Year's resolutions keeping, Seattle, Washington ranked the best city in the U.S. Whatever, WalletHub. Come down here and tell us. No.
Today's going to be a good day, an interesting day.
Amazing story coming up.
A story coming up, and a story that sounds like a movie. Sounds like what? Who? How could that happen?
Yeah.
Those kind of stories that's going to come up, and we have a fantastic guest that's going to be with us to discuss that. Let's get Miss Faye in before we go to the break. When we come back, we're going to come back to the story.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah.
I am doing well this morning. How you doing?
Doing good.
What's his name?
That's good. I was just saying, because I was saying that I don't know much about Kwanzaa, but I do understand their principles.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we will do best by trying to be a little bit better than we were last year.
Yes.
Because all this thing about money and having a lot of money and rich people pay the most taxes or whatever it is, that's none really essential, because the things that you should have and do, money can't buy that.
Yes,
You can have a lot of money and don't have character. You can have a lot of stuff. Money can't make you happy. It feels good to have it when you have it, but that's only temporarily too, because I've never seen a Wells Fargo truck follow in her to the graveyard. And I think that when you talk about the Republicans, and if you're a Democrat, you're the devil, whatever it is, this country is not based on a one-party system. It's based on a two-party system. You need both parties to bring different ideas on how to do anything. And each president that has been president in the past, some of the things they did might have been good, and we kept some things that we say that is not good, we don't keep. But now we are so mean-spirited and against somebody that might be different than themselves, that we don't understand that we're all God's people. And he created us all. It's just like the flowers white people. No, that takes too much energy. We need to come together as a people of these United States. And if we value our country, if we value the Constitution, if we value the freedom of religion or anything else like that, and we care about our neighbors, that don't mean it's the neighbor lives next door to you, although it's a neighbor. But what about the people around you?
Thank you, Ms.
Coming
Fan.
together and doing some good things will serve us well.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Fan.
Thank you so much.
When we come back, we're going to take a quick break in just a second. When we come back, we're going to be talking to the nationally renowned criminal and civil trial attorney, Mr. Ted Williams.
Oh, yeah.
We are so honored to have him with us. If the name sounds familiar to you, it should. You have probably seen him on almost every news show there is in the country. Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, Geraldo Rivera, name them. Greta, Wolf, Crossfire, Bill O'Reilly, he's there. He's the guy that you go to when you want to know the legal ins and outs of criminal and civil law. And so we are honored to have him with him. We're honored to have him with him because he's got a story that you won't believe with a client that he's talking about. And I want him to tell the story and not us tell the story. So we're going to come right back to him. We got to talk to him also because he's a homeboy. He's right there in Lake Charles, Louisiana, right up the street. He's one of us, y'all.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. So we'll be glad to talk to him when we get back. Make sure that you give us a call. Listen in. Listen to this story, and we'll come back to you in just a minute.
228-896-9455. Be sure to log on to the It's a New Day with Rip Daniels Facebook page, and we'll be back.
It's about that time to get away.
Whitlock.
Make your reservations, pack your bags, and head on down to the coast. The Almanac